Watch your lines, Johnny.
During a watch, where no matter what sail you have up, there's be a conversation about if someone goes overboard, what kind of takedown we're going to be doing.
So so you have that safety officer on board, which is awesome. Another like a duplicated watch captain, kind of.
Yeah, well,
but his only responsibilities are safety.
If I wasn't a safety officer, it would be watch captain.
You're talking right now. Which we promote is that our safety briefing doesn't just happen when you step on the boat. It's the safety briefing for, all right, on this jibe, all right, on this tack, all right, these are what the critical aspects are. That continual mantra of throughout the ride or throughout the race, continually talking about that safety officer's responsibility is to continually promote the safety on the vessel in every configuration that you're sailing, in every sea state.
Right. Yeah, and then that goes to the watch turnover, so that when you're coming up on deck, certainly the crew, that's why it's good to get up early. Get up on deck 10 minutes at least before the watch turnover, because the other crew, they're tired. Their goal is to get down below to get some rest so they can perform well at their next watch. But the turnover is crucial. The bowman will be going about the halyard setup, where the changing spinnaker sheet is, how that's rigged up. And then, maybe even for like what kind of spinnaker takedown, we might be rigged up for a what they call a letterbox with a lazy guy, if it's a symmetrical spinnaker, or the windward sheet. You'll take a bite of that and pass it up over the boom and have it rigged up. And it's like, well, maybe we won't be taking it down, but at least we're prepared for the worst case scenario in advance of needing to take it down. And, maybe we're planning on taking the spinnaker down sometime tomorrow if the weather's that consistent, but we'll have it all rigged up in advance, because then you've saved yourself some time in the moment you need it, if you need it immediately. So there's a lot of preparation there. But then, as a watch captain, you're looking at it's a procedure of giving respect to all the issues, whether you're going to pump the bilge, how many. And it's good to do it by hand, because then you can count the pumps. If it's an electric pump that's in automatic mode all the time, you won't know if you've got a leak or not. It's going to be running and you won't notice, And so if you have that as a log entry where you put it into the, so it's at least, depending on your log frequency, it could be half hour, it could be, hour, 2 hours in the ocean maybe is pretty reasonable. But, you're keeping track so that if you do, suddenly it's like, well, last 2 hours ago it was 10 pumps. This time it was 50.
Right. And you're writing that down. You have the running log on that.
Right.
The running log is everything else that you're doing for the race, keeping things going, and even if you're just cruising, this is what was happening for the shift.
Right.
Yeah.
Certainly, if you had somebody seasick down below, that would be in the narrative log.
In the narrative, and they're time checked, temperature. So you're doing everything,
and include that at the time that you do the log on the boat. And then there's the navigation aspect. Making sure the headings are right. Looking to see if we've been trying to get a little too happy on the waves by running deep and going like, who can sail the boat the fastest isn't really the fastest way to get there sometimes.
Sometimes it's the fastest way to break the boat, too. Who can break the boat the fastest?
I've been there. But, so there's that. Navigation is also tied into performance. Monitoring the temperature of the water. We're going into the Gulf Stream. All these things that are sort of sequenced to racing the boat, including, the weather system. You get your grid files coming in. And maybe you run an expedition, which is really cool, but it always varies from what is predicted, and you have to have a good understanding of the weather, even including looking at the clouds.
Okay, the preparation, watch captain's prep is he's going to have his crew. Does he pick his crew? Pretty much who works well with him on his shifts. What kind of shifts do you guys would run? We for what we do with my work, we select crews. 6 months in advance, pretty much. The really beginning of January for a June deployment, and so you want to, with the number of people that we have, we can't put all the best guys on one boat. So we're focused on the leadership first, and then and down to the most, and half the crew
will be the least experienced, maybe have only been sailing 6 months prior to that. And so there's a lot of training. So the preparation begins in January when we have the construct of the teams, and we start our lecture series. And so we do, coal regs, navigation, sail trim, because we always want to go fast too, and then crew overboard is a big one. And then we'll do the safety at sea seminar and demonstrate the maneuvers for the public on the Severn River. And it's interesting. There'll be, and so by the time, in the 2 weeks that we have to train, they'll have done at least 30 crew overboard drills, whether they do it specifically with the spinnaker or the figure 8 fast return or the classic quick stop, which is the quick stop's the only one that's recommended or required, that is, to demonstrate once among a Newport Bermuda crew. So they all have to sign off a sheet that they've done this together, and that's it. So our crews, by the first weekend in April, will have done at least 30 crew overboard drills to practice it.
And that's upwind, downwind.
Yeah, so one boat will get a specific. You're going to do the spinnaker one. You're going to do the figure 8, so that they can really focus on that specific maneuver rather than have them all to practice equally. And then there was one day I was in the crowd, and I'm listening, and the mids made a little bit of a mistake, and I could hear the criticism. Oh, they screwed this up and screwed that up. And so I went to this one guy, and he goes, "Well, how many crew overboards have you done?" They go, "Well, we do 2, maybe 3 in the spring, but we think we've got it." And I go, "Well, these mids have been practicing for a couple weeks, and they made a mistake. What do you think the chances of you making a mistake in the heat of the battle, when things are a little more chaotic, at night, in breeze?" So this is why we practice. So by the time we do our Delmarva, which before we go offshore, we now do comprehensive training. And by the time that they head off to the Delmarva, they'll have done at least 100, maybe 120 crew overboard drills. And then we do the Delmarva, where we have to do, it's about 8 a day, including at night. In whatever the wind conditions that we have, and in the ocean. So we'll get out in the ocean. Now we have a different issue where, if you practice with a paper bag, which simulates about the size of somebody's head, you throw it over the back end of the boat and just sail away from it and count till you can't see it anymore. It'll be 15, 20 seconds. As soon as you get one wave away, there, the bag's in the trough while you're on the crest, and vice versa. And it's gone. So emphasize the pointer and some other navigational considerations to help you, knowing the wind direction and wind angles and how to return to the same spot. And typically we get it down to just a couple minutes. The spinnaker quick stop is typically the fastest because there's no more tacking. You'll tack the boat,
and you're done,
and you're facing the Oscar. You're within a couple boat lengths. So we've done this on TP52s where you're doing 18 knots and it's time to turn the boat around. It gets a little exciting. But you have half the watch on deck when you practice this. So getting everybody up on deck.
On the boats where I'm at, we're moving fast. We do them at even 25 knots. And when you're triple headed, it takes some distance to get the boat under control. Well, and so that's really important. And what we're getting ready to put out a new article. It's about what constitutes an MOB drill or a crew overboard drill. Because the requirements for the racing are do a crew overboard drill. That's a requirement, but they don't necessarily say what that is. And so we're going to start breaking it down and starting to really push that there's 3 phases. The first phase is maneuvering the boat to the person who's in the water. Phase number 1. The second is going to be attaching that person to the boat. And then most important, the third, getting that person out of the water. That is the most difficult, and it's so different. People aren't training on getting the person out of the water. Or a simulated dummy, an Oscar. Get that out of the water. I don't care if it's 2 5-gallon buckets tied together. I don't care if it's a fire hose that floats. It doesn't make a difference. But understanding how to get people out of the water is the most critical. Absolutely. That's an MOB drill. Up until that point, it's a boat maneuverability drill and attaching something to the boat drill. But getting the person onto the boat is the most critical element of that COB. And that watch captain, you know, he's the one that's there trying to manage all that practice. So what happens when the watch captain goes in the water?
Well, with a typical 44-foot boat that we sail, there's, you know, 4 crew and 1 safety officer.
Yep.
So now you're down to 3 crew, 1 safety officer.
There you go.
And so someone's driving, someone might be down below, let me count the people. And then you have someone who can trim sails. And then the pointer, that's his job, one and only. He's not there to take sails down or drive the boat. You know, so that's why it's really important to roust the watch from down below. So a little more detail in the sequences is beyond 3, where, you know, you got to get the boat turned around. And to get the boat, you don't want any more victims in the water. You know, having the harnesses on, really good idea. You know, but rousting that crew from down below, they have to know what to do. They have to come on deck with their harnesses, whether they have clothes on or not.
Just harness.
I've been there.
Clothes don't make a difference. The harness and the PFD does make a difference.
You know, when it's cold out, it's like, woo. Anyway, getting that crew up, and so there may be some hesitation, as well as you want to get the sails down before you get back too soon. If you get back too soon, you'll be so busy taking the sails down that you can't deal with the final execution to getting the crew overboard. So it's a multifaceted thing. So the first thing is pointer, hitting the button for navigation for the crew overboard. And then, you know, if you have a chance to get the best helmsman on board, yes, but that's why we cross-train, so that everybody has a chance of getting this right. And then, you know, as always, like when we were sailing Zarafa, we would always leave the winch handle in the winch that had the spinnaker halyard, because you got 4 winches up around the companionway there. And so we immediately know that's the one to go for.
Right.
You know, you don't want this last minute confusion of, you know, suddenly the mainsail's coming down. You know, you really got to make sure that, because people would be coming up on deck to assist that aren't familiar for the moment of how the watch has been executed prior to that.
Especially when you have multiple halyards, right? So you probably have 2 up there. You have a I1, I2.
Well, also we had maybe a lock on the spinnaker halyard.
Right, or a spin.
So that has to be
release the lock.
Release the lock. So these little steps cause delay, but they also, it's like you know, there's an adage, you know, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. If you go rushing into something really quickly, that's when you have a chance to make these mistakes, and some of them, they're hard to reverse, because the worst case scenario, the spinnaker goes into water, and now you're parked with your crew. You know,
just go through the steps. Understand the steps in your head. I mean that's where it comes through. That's where practice comes through too. You know, I mean, by your 50th or 60th time, you know, it could almost be muscle memory, and you're erasing those mistakes as time goes by.
That's what training does for you with everything.
Yeah, make it a habit.
And so on a boat like a TP52, we would consider doing a Mexican takedown, because if you're doing, you know, 20 knots and you're surfing the waves, you go poking the boat into the wind, suddenly you've got, you know, 35 knots of wind, or maybe more even, maybe 40 knots of apparent wind immediately, where if you're doing 20 knots and it's blowing 25, you've got 5 knots of wind, apparent wind, to take the spinnaker down in. And so you drive the boat then, and then you complete your work going around. So a lot of it's boat specific. It's where you have to train for, and you know, knowing your boat, and then repeating the training so that everybody can work like a well-oiled machine when you do it.